The morning sun shone bright over Buckingham Palace. Princess Charlotte stood next to her mother, Catherine, on the palace steps. She wore a blue dress with white flowers. Her hair was tied back with a matching ribbon. The 8-year-old princess tried to stand very still, just like her parents taught her. Today was another important day at the palace. Foreign visitors from Japan were coming to meet the royal family. There would be ceremonies, speeches, and lots of pictures. Charlotte had done this many times before, but she still felt nervous when so many people watched her. The palace courtyard was full of people. Reporters held big cameras. Government officials wore dark suits. Palace workers rushed around making sure everything was perfect. Everyone had a job to do, and everyone knew exactly what they were supposed to do. But the most impressive people in the courtyard were the royal guards. They stood like statues in their bright red uniforms and tall, black hats. Their boots were shiny black leather. Their buttons gleamed in the sunlight. Each guard held a rifle and stood perfectly straight. They looked ahead and never moved their eyes. They never smiled or talked or even blinked very much. Charlotte had learned about these guards from her father, Prince William. He told her they were some of the best soldiers in the world. They protected the royal family and the palace. They trained for years to learn how to stand so still and follow all the rules. The rules for royal guards were very strict. They could not talk unless someone with higher rank talked to them first. They could not move from their position unless ordered to do so. They could not look around or wave or smile at people. They had to pretend that nothing else in the world existed except their duty to guard the palace. If a guard broke these rules, bad things would happen. They might lose their job. They might never work as a royal guard again. Some guards had been sent away from the palace forever just for moving their head too much or for smiling at a tourist. Charlotte watched the guards and wondered how they could stand so still for so long. Her legs got tired after just a few minutes of standing in one place. But these men stood for hours without moving. They did this even when it was very hot or very cold or raining. The palace had many different ceremonies throughout the year. There was the changing of the guard ceremony that happened every few days. Tourists came from all over the world to watch this. The old guards would march away, and new guards would march in to take their place. It was like a dance, but very serious and formal. There were also state visits when important people from other countries came to meet the royal family. These visits required even more guards and even stricter rules. Everyone had to follow a plan that was written down months before the visit. Every step, every word, every minute was planned out. Charlotte had been part of these ceremonies since she was very small. When she was 3 years old, she just had to wave at people. Now that she was 8, she had to do much more. She had to shake hands with important people. She had to listen to long speeches. She had to smile even when she was tired or bored. Her parents always reminded her about good behavior before these events. "Stand up straight," her mother would say. "Smile, but not too much. Keep your hands by your sides. Don't fidget with your dress or your hair." Her father would add, "Remember, Charlotte, many people are watching you. They want to see how a princess should behave. You represent our family and our country." Charlotte understood this was important, but sometimes it felt very hard. She was still just a little girl who wanted to run and play and laugh loudly. Standing still and being quiet for hours was not fun for her. The guards made her feel safe, but they also made her feel a little scared. They were so serious and so still. They never looked at her directly. It was like they were not real people at all, but rather like toy soldiers that someone had placed around the palace. Sometimes Charlotte wondered what the guards thought about while they stood there. Did they get bored? Did their feet hurt? Did they want to scratch their nose or cough? What would happen if one of them really needed to use the bathroom during a long ceremony? She had asked her father these questions once. He smiled and told her that the guards were very well trained. They learned how to ignore discomfort and focus only on their job. "They are like athletes," he said. "They train their bodies and minds to be strong." But Charlotte still wondered about them as people. Did they have families? Did they have pets? What did they like to eat? What made them laugh when they were not working? The ceremony today would last for 2 hours. Charlotte knew this because she had heard her parents talking about the schedule. 2 hours of standing and smiling, and listening to speeches in languages she did not understand. She looked around the courtyard one more time before the ceremony began. The guards were already in their positions. The band was ready with their instruments. The photographers were checking their cameras. Everyone was waiting for the Japanese visitors to arrive. Charlotte took a deep breath and tried to remember everything her parents had taught her. Stand straight, smile politely, keep her hand still, listen carefully, be respectful. The sound of car engines came from the palace gates. The important visitors were arriving. Charlotte felt her stomach get a little tight with nervousness. She looked at her mother, who gave her a small, encouraging smile. It was time for another royal ceremony to begin. Charlotte straightened her shoulders and prepared to do her duty as a princess, just like the guards prepared to do their duty as protectors of the palace. In a few minutes, the courtyard would be full of activity and formal words and careful movements. But for now, there was just the quiet moment before it all began, with the morning sun shining down on the palace and everyone in their proper places. 3 weeks before the Japanese visit, something different happened during a regular palace ceremony. Charlotte was walking down the grand steps of Buckingham Palace with her family. They were going to meet the Prime Minister and some other important people from the government. Charlotte wore her favorite pink dress that day. It had small pearls sewn along the neckline, and she felt very grown up wearing it. Her mother had given her a matching pearl bracelet that morning. "This was my grandmother's," Catherine had said while putting it on Charlotte's wrist. "It will help you remember to be brave." The palace steps were made of old stone and could be slippery. Charlotte had walked down them many times, but she still had to be careful. The steps were built for adults, not for 8-year-old girls, so she had to take smaller steps to keep her balance. As they walked down, Charlotte was looking at all the people gathered in the courtyard. There were so many faces watching her. Family. Some people were taking pictures, others were just staring. Charlotte sometimes felt like she was in a zoo, with everyone looking at her like she was an interesting animal. She was trying to wave politely at the crowd when her foot slipped a little on one of the stone steps. It was not a big slip, and she caught herself quickly. Nobody else in her family even noticed. But for a moment, Charlotte felt scared that she might fall in front of all those people. When she looked up after catching her balance, her eyes met the eyes of one of the royal guards. He was standing at attention near the bottom of the steps, just like all the other guards. He wore the same red uniform and tall black hat. He held his rifle in the same position. But something was different about this guard. While all the other guards looked straight ahead with blank faces, this guard's eyes showed something else. For just a quick moment, Charlotte saw kindness in his eyes. It was like he was saying, "Are you okay, princess?" Without moving his mouth or making any sound. The moment lasted only a few seconds. Then the guard looked straight ahead again, just like he was supposed to do. Charlotte continued walking with her family, but she kept thinking about what had just happened. During the rest of the ceremony, Charlotte found herself looking back at that guard. He stood perfectly still like all the others. His face showed no expression, but somehow Charlotte felt like he was still watching out for her, even though he could not show it. Later that day, Charlotte asked her mother about the guards. "Mama, do the guards ever talk to each other?" Catherine was brushing Charlotte's hair before bedtime. "Not while they are working, darling. They have to follow very strict rules." "But do they care about us? I mean, do they think about us as real people?" Catherine smiled. "Of course they do, Charlotte. But they show they care by doing their job well. They protect us by following all the rules, even when it is hard." Charlotte nodded, but she was still thinking about the look in that guard's eyes. It felt different from just doing a job. It felt personal, like he really cared about what happened to her. The next week, there was another ceremony. This time, the royal family was greeting visitors from France. Charlotte wore a yellow dress and the same pearl bracelet her mother had given her. As they walked through the palace courtyard, Charlotte looked for the same guard. She found him standing in a different position, but she recognized him right away. He was taller than most of the other guards, and he had a small scar near his left ear that she had noticed before. During this ceremony, something else happened. The French visitors brought their own photographers, and there were bright camera flashes going off constantly. Charlotte was not expecting this, and the sudden bright lights made her blink and feel confused. She stopped walking for a moment and put her hand up to shade her eyes. When she looked around, she saw the same guard watching her. Again, his eyes showed concern. It was very quick and nobody else would have noticed it, but Charlotte saw it clearly. After that ceremony, Charlotte started paying more attention to this particular guard. She learned that he was always positioned somewhere near her family, during public events. Sometimes he was by the steps, sometimes by the main entrance, and sometimes along the path where they walked. She also noticed that he was very good at his job. He stood straighter than many of the other guards. His uniform was always perfect. He never fidgeted or looked around like some of the younger guards did. But most importantly, she noticed that he seemed to be keeping an eye on her safety in a way that went beyond his regular duties. When crowds of people got too close, he would shift his position slightly. When the ceremonies went on for a long time and Charlotte looked tired, she could feel him watching to make sure she was okay. Charlotte began to feel less nervous during palace events, knowing that this guard was there. She did not know his name, or anything about him as a person, but she felt like she had a secret friend who was looking out for her. One day, Charlotte asked her father about the guards during their morning walk in the palace gardens. "Papa, how long do the guards work at the palace?" Prince William thought for a moment. "It depends, Charlotte. Some guards work here for just a few years. Others stay for their whole career. The best guards sometimes work here for 15 or 20 years. Do you know their names?" "I know some of them. The senior officers mostly. Why do you ask?" Charlotte was not sure how to explain her question without talking about the special connection she felt with one particular guard. "I just wondered if they like working here." Her father smiled. "I think most of them are very proud to work at the palace. It is considered a great honor to be chosen as a royal guard. They have to be excellent soldiers and pass many tests." That evening, Charlotte looked up information about royal guards in one of her books. She learned that they came from some of the best military units in the country. They trained for months before they could work at the palace. They had to be physically strong, mentally tough, and completely trustworthy. The book said that royal guards took an oath to protect the royal family with their lives. Charlotte had never thought about this before. These men were not just standing around looking formal. They were actually ready to fight dangerous people if necessary. This made Charlotte think about her special guard differently. He was not just being kind to a little girl. He was a trained soldier whose job was to keep her safe. But still, there was something extra in the way he watched out for her. Charlotte decided to call him her guardian in her mind, since she did not know his real name. She began to feel grateful that he was always there during the scary parts of being a princess. She also began to understand that even though he could not talk to her or show his feelings openly, he was communicating with her in his own way. The kindness in his eyes was his way of saying, "I am here. You are safe. You can do this." As more weeks passed, Charlotte found herself looking forward to palace ceremonies a little more, knowing that her guardian would be there watching over her. Over the next several weeks, Charlotte began to notice patterns in how her guardian watched over her. It started small, but gradually became something she could count on during difficult palace events. The first time Charlotte realized they had a real connection was during a ceremony for the opening of a new hospital. The event was held in the palace gardens, and Charlotte's family had to stand in the hot sun for over an hour, while many people gave speeches. Charlotte was wearing a heavy velvet dress that day because it was a very formal occasion. The sun was beating down on everyone, and she started to feel very warm and uncomfortable. Her feet hurt in her fancy shoes and she was getting thirsty. She tried to stand perfectly still like she was taught, but she was starting to feel dizzy. Without thinking about it, Charlotte reached up and touched the pearl bracelet on her wrist. It was becoming a habit when she felt nervous or uncomfortable. As soon as she touched the bracelet, she looked around and found her guardian standing about 20 feet away. He was looking straight ahead like always, but somehow she knew he had seen her gesture. A few minutes later, one of the palace staff members quietly approached her mother and whispered something. Her mother then leaned down and asked Charlotte if she needed some water. Charlotte was surprised. Nobody had asked her if she needed anything during ceremonies before. Usually, she just had to wait until everything was finished. But somehow water appeared and she felt much better. She looked back at her guardian and for just a moment, she thought she saw the tiniest smile on his face before he went back to his serious expression. After that day, Charlotte started touching her bracelet whenever she felt overwhelmed during palace events. It was not something she planned to do. It just happened naturally when she needed to feel calm and safe. And every time she did it, something small but helpful would happen. If she was feeling tired, a chair would appear nearby. If the crowd was too loud, palace staff would ask people to quiet down. If she looked confused during a ceremony, someone would quietly explain what was happening. Charlotte began to suspect that her guardian was somehow making these things happen. She was not sure how, because he never moved from his position or spoke to anyone. But the timing was always perfect. The connection became stronger during a state dinner at the palace. Charlotte was allowed to attend the beginning of the dinner because she was getting older and needed to learn about formal events. She wore her best dress and tried to remember all the rules about which fork to use and how to sit properly. The dining room was full of important people from different countries. Everyone was speaking in quiet, serious voices about politics and business. Charlotte felt very small and out of place among all these adults. Halfway through the first course, Charlotte accidentally knocked over her water glass. The water spilled across the white tablecloth and dripped onto her dress. She felt her face turn red with embarrassment. Some of the important guests looked at her and frowned. Charlotte wanted to disappear. She touched her bracelet and looked around desperately for her guardian. She found him standing near the entrance to the dining room. He was supposed to be looking straight ahead, but his eyes met hers for just a second. Immediately, one of the palace staff members appeared with a towel and quietly cleaned up the spill. Another staff member brought Charlotte a new napkin and helped fix her dress. The whole thing was handled so quickly and quietly that most of the guests went back to their conversations without paying much attention. Charlotte felt so grateful that she almost started crying, not because she was sad, but because someone had helped her when she really needed it. After the dinner, Charlotte told her mother what had happened. "Mama, I spilled water at dinner, but someone helped me right away." Catherine smiled. "Yes, I saw that. The palace staff are very good at handling these situations. They know that accidents happen, especially to children." Charlotte wanted to tell her mother about her guardian and how he seemed to know when she needed help, but she was not sure how to explain it without sounding silly. Adults might not understand about the special connection she felt. Instead, Charlotte decided to test her theory. During the next few palace events, she would touch her bracelet at different times to see what would happen. At a ceremony for visiting school children, Charlotte touched her bracelet when she felt bored during a long speech. Within minutes, her father leaned down and whispered something interesting about the history of the palace to help keep her attention. At a garden party for charity workers, Charlotte touched her bracelet when she felt nervous about meeting so many new people. Soon after, her mother suggested they take a short break and walk around the garden together. During a military parade, Charlotte touched her bracelet when the loud music from the marching band hurt her ears. A palace worker quickly appeared and gave her small earplugs that made the noise more comfortable. Each time, Charlotte would look for her guardian afterward. He would still be standing in his position, looking formal and serious, but she began to notice very small signs that he was watching out for her. Sometimes he would shift his weight slightly when she was having trouble. Sometimes his eyes would move just a tiny bit in her direction when she needed help. Sometimes his face would relax just a little when he saw that she was feeling better. Charlotte realized that her guardian had learned to read her signals. The pearl bracelet touching had become their secret code. When she touched it and looked his way, he knew she needed help. Then he would find a way to alert the palace staff without anyone noticing. Charlotte was amazed by how clever this was. Her guardian could not break the rules by talking to her or moving from his position, but he had found a way to take care of her anyway. She also realized that her guardian was taking a big risk by doing this. If his superiors found out that he was paying special attention to her instead of just doing his regular job, he could get in trouble. This made Charlotte feel even more special and grateful. Her guardian was not just following orders. He was choosing to care about her as a person, even though it might be dangerous for his career. Charlotte started to look forward to palace events more because she knew her guardian would be there. She felt braver and more confident knowing that someone was watching out for her in a special way. She also began to understand that her guardian was teaching her something important. He showed her that even when rules are very strict, people can still find ways to be kind and helpful to each other. Charlotte decided that she wanted to find a way to thank her guardian, even though she still did not know his name or anything about his life outside the palace. She began to think about what she could do to show him that she appreciated his secret care and protection. The connection between Charlotte and her guardian was growing stronger every day, and soon it would be tested in a way that neither of them expected. The day that changed everything started like any other important palace event. The President of Germany was coming to visit, and it was one of the biggest state visits of the year. Charlotte had been preparing for weeks, learning about German culture and practicing her best behavior. She woke up early that morning feeling excited but also nervous. Her mother had laid out a beautiful navy blue dress with silver buttons for her to wear. The pearl bracelet that had become so important to her was polished and ready on her dresser. "Today is very special, Charlotte," her father said during breakfast. "The German president is bringing his whole family, including his granddaughter who is about your age. You will get to meet another girl who understands what it is like to be part of an important family." Charlotte liked this idea. She rarely got to meet other children during palace events. Most of the time, she was surrounded by serious adults in suits who talked about politics and economics. The ceremony was scheduled to begin at 11 in the morning and would last for 2 hours. There would be speeches, a military parade, and a formal lunch. Charlotte's part would be to stand with her family, shake hands with the German visitors, and smile for the photographers. As Charlotte got dressed, she noticed that the weather outside looked very hot. The sun was shining brightly, and there were no clouds in the sky. Her mother opened the window and warm air filled the room immediately. "It is going to be quite warm today," Catherine said. "Make sure you drink plenty of water this morning, Charlotte. We will be standing outside for a long time." Charlotte drank 2 full glasses of water with her breakfast and put on the lightest undergarments she had. Even so, she could tell that the heavy formal dress would be uncomfortable in the heat. When they arrived at the ceremony location in the palace courtyard, Charlotte was surprised by how many people were there. In addition to the usual crowd of government officials and reporters, there were hundreds of invited guests. German flags hung everywhere, and a military band was warming up their instruments. Charlotte quickly looked around for her guardian. She found him standing in his usual position near the main walkway. He looked as serious and formal as always, but seeing him there made Charlotte feel more confident about the long day ahead. The German visitors arrived exactly on time. The president was a tall man with gray hair who smiled warmly when he met Charlotte's family. His wife was kind and spoke excellent English. But the most interesting person was their granddaughter, Emma, who was 9 years old and wore a dress very similar to Charlotte's. Emma seemed just as nervous as Charlotte felt. When they shook hands, Emma whispered, "I hate these formal events." "Do you?" Charlotte was surprised by Emma's honesty, but she whispered back, "Sometimes, but we have to do them anyway." The 2 girls stood together during the beginning of the ceremony. Charlotte felt better having someone her own age nearby who understood what it was like to be watched by so many people. But as the morning went on, the heat became a serious problem. The sun was beating down on the courtyard with no shade anywhere. Charlotte's heavy dress was starting to stick to her skin, and sweat was running down her back. The ceremony was running longer than planned because the German president was giving a much longer speech than expected. Charlotte's parents had to keep smiling and nodding politely, even though Charlotte could see that they were getting uncomfortable too. Charlotte tried all the tricks her parents had taught her for dealing with long ceremonies. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. She took slow, deep breaths. She tried to think about fun things like her favorite books and games, but nothing was working. The heat was getting worse and Charlotte was starting to feel sick. Her head was getting dizzy and her stomach felt strange. She was sweating so much that her hair was getting wet under her hat. Charlotte looked at the schedule that was printed in her program. There were still 20 more minutes of speeches, then the military parade, then more speeches. She did not think she could stand up for that much longer. She touched her pearl bracelet and looked around for her guardian. He was still in his position, but she could see that he was also suffering from the heat. All the guards were wearing their heavy red uniforms and tall hats. They had to be even hotter than she was. Charlotte tried to get her guardian's attention by looking directly at him, but there were so many people between them that she was not sure he could see her clearly. The German president was still talking, and everyone was supposed to keep listening politely. Charlotte felt like she was trapped. She could not sit down or leave or even ask for help without interrupting the important ceremony. Her vision started to get blurry around the edges. The voices of the speakers began to sound far away and echoing. Charlotte realized that she was about to faint, and if that happened, she would probably fall down in front of hundreds of people and television cameras from around the world. The thought of fainting during such an important event made Charlotte feel panic on top of her physical discomfort. She knew that if she collapsed, it would be a disaster for her family and for the diplomatic relationship between Britain and Germany. Charlotte touched her bracelet again, this time more urgently. She looked desperately around the courtyard for her guardian. When she finally spotted him, she stared directly at his face, trying to communicate with her eyes that this was an emergency. She mouthed the word "help" silently, hoping he would understand that this was not like the other times, when she just felt uncomfortable or bored. This time she was really in trouble. For a moment, Charlotte was not sure if her guardian had seen her signal. He continued looking straight ahead like always. But then, very slowly, his eyes moved in her direction. When their eyes met across the crowded courtyard, Charlotte saw immediate understanding in his face. He could see that she was in real distress, not just feeling tired or nervous. Charlotte watched as her guardian's expression changed from formal indifference to serious concern. She could see him making a decision, weighing his duty to follow protocol against his instinct to help a child in danger. The moment seemed to last forever, even though it was probably only a few seconds. Charlotte felt herself getting dizzier and more nauseous. She was not sure how much longer she could stay standing. Then, without any warning, Charlotte saw her guardian step out of his formation and begin walking toward her family. He was moving, quickly but trying not to cause a scene. Charlotte felt a mixture of relief and fear. She was glad that help was coming, but she was also worried about what would happen to her guardian for breaking the rules in such a public way. All around the courtyard, people were starting to notice that something unusual was happening. A royal guard was walking away from his post during an important ceremony. This had never been seen before. Charlotte's guardian was about to risk his entire career to help her, and there was no way to stop what was about to happen. Sergeant James Morrison had been a royal guard for 15 years. In all that time, he had never once left his post during a ceremony. He had stood through rainstorms, snowstorms, and heat waves. He had maintained his position while feeling sick, while dealing with personal problems, and while watching countless boring speeches. But as he looked at Princess Charlotte across the courtyard, Morrison knew that all his training and all the rules meant nothing compared to the safety of a child, who was clearly in serious trouble. Morrison could see that Charlotte was about to collapse. Her face was pale and sweaty. She was swaying slightly on her feet. Her eyes had the unfocused look that he recognized from his military training as the warning signs of heat exhaustion. Morrison made his decision in an instant. He stepped out of formation and began walking directly toward the royal family. Every step he took was breaking centuries of royal protocol, but he did not care. As Morrison walked across the courtyard, he could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes turning toward him. The other guards noticed first. They kept their positions, but Morrison could see the shock on their faces. Guards simply did not move during ceremonies, ever. Then the palace officials began to notice. Morrison saw the head of security speaking urgently into his radio. Palace staff members were looking confused and alarmed. Some of them began moving toward Morrison, but they were not sure what to do because nothing like this had ever happened before. The guests at the ceremony were starting to whisper and point. Reporters were lifting their cameras to take pictures of the unusual scene. The German visitors looked puzzled about what was happening. But Morrison ignored all of this. His entire focus was on reaching Princess Charlotte before she collapsed. Prince. William was listening to the German president's speech when he noticed movement in his peripheral vision. He turned slightly and saw Morrison approaching the royal family. William's first reaction was confusion. Guards did not approach the royal family during public events unless there was a serious emergency. Then William saw Morrison's face. The guard's expression was urgent and concerned, not threatening. William had been around palace security long, enough to know that Morrison would not be breaking protocol without a very good reason. Morrison reached the edge of the formal area where the royal family was standing. Several palace security officers were moving toward him now, ready to stop him if necessary. But Morrison held up one hand in a gesture that clearly said, "Wait, this is important." Morrison walked directly to Prince William. In a quiet, but clear, voice he said, "Your Royal Highness, Princess Charlotte appears to be suffering from heat exhaustion. She needs immediate medical attention." William immediately looked at his daughter. Until Morrison spoke, William had been focused on the ceremony and had not noticed Charlotte's condition. But now he could see that she was indeed in distress. Her face was flushed and she was clearly struggling to stay upright. William did not hesitate. He stepped forward and put his arm around Charlotte's shoulders. "Charlotte, are you feeling unwell?" Charlotte looked up at her father with relief. "Papa, I feel very sick. Everything is spinning and I think I might faint." Catherine, who had also now noticed what was happening, immediately moved to Charlotte's other side. "We need to get her inside right away," she said to William. The German president, who had been in the middle of his speech, stopped talking when he saw the commotion around the British royal family. The entire ceremony came to a halt as everyone tried to understand what was happening. William made a quick decision. He picked up Charlotte in his arms and began walking toward the palace entrance. Catherine walked beside them, shielding Charlotte from the cameras as much as possible. Palace staff immediately sprang into action. Someone called for a doctor. Others began making announcements to the crowd about a brief delay in the ceremony. Security officers cleared a path to the palace entrance. Morrison watched as Princess Charlotte was carried to safety. He felt enormous relief that she was getting the help she needed. But he also knew that his career was probably over. Breaking protocol during a state visit in front of television cameras and foreign dignitaries was not something that the palace would overlook. As soon as the royal family disappeared into the palace, Morrison found himself surrounded by senior security officers. The head of palace security, Colonel Andrews, walked up to Morrison with a very serious expression. "Sergeant Morrison," Colonel Andrews said in a low voice, "you will come with me immediately." Morrison nodded and followed Colonel Andrews away from the ceremony area. As they walked, Morrison could hear the German president resuming his speech and the ceremony continuing without the British royal family. Two other security officers walked behind Morrison as they entered the palace through a side entrance. Morrison knew this was standard procedure when a guard was being removed from duty. He was not under arrest, but he was definitely in serious trouble. They went to a small office in the palace security wing. Colonel Andrews closed the door and sat down behind a desk. Morrison remained standing at attention, as he had been trained to do. "Sergeant Morrison," Colonel Andrews began, "in 15 years of service, you have been an exemplary guard. Your record is spotless. That is why I am having difficulty understanding what just happened out there." Morrison looked straight ahead as he answered. "Sir, Princess Charlotte was showing clear signs of heat exhaustion. She was about to collapse. I made the decision that her immediate safety was more important than maintaining protocol. You understand that what you did was completely against regulations. Guards do not leave their posts. Guards do not approach the royal family during public events. Guards do not interrupt state ceremonies." "Yes, sir. I understand that I broke multiple regulations." Colonel Andrews leaned back in his chair and studied Morrison carefully. "Sergeant Morrison, you have put me in a very difficult position. I cannot ignore what happened. There will have to be a full investigation. Morrison continued, looking straight ahead. I understand, sir. You are relieved of duty immediately. You will surrender your weapon and your radio. You are not to leave London while the investigation is ongoing. Morrison handed over his rifle and his communication equipment. 15 years of service was ending in a matter of minutes because he had chosen to help a sick child. As Morrison was escorted out of the palace, he passed by other guards who had been called in to replace him and the other guards from the ceremony. Some of them looked at him with respect, others with confusion. All of them knew that they had just witnessed something that would be talked about in palace security circles for years to come. Morrison did not regret his decision. As he walked out of Buckingham Palace for what might be the last time, he thought about Princess Charlotte and hoped that she was feeling better. He had chosen to put her welfare above his own career, and he would make the same choice again if he had to. Inside the palace, doctors were examining Charlotte in a private medical room. She was already feeling much better in the cool air conditioning, with plenty of water to drink and a comfortable chair to sit in. The crisis was over, but the consequences of Morrison's decision to break protocol were just beginning. Within 30 minutes of Sergeant Morrison being escorted from the palace grounds, news of the incident had spread far beyond the ceremony courtyard. Palace staff were talking about it in hushed whispers. Security officers were trying to piece together exactly what had happened and why. The German state visit continued, but everyone could feel that something important had changed. The German president and his family were very understanding about Charlotte's medical emergency. They had children and grandchildren of their own, and they knew that health always came first, even during important diplomatic events. Princess Charlotte was resting in the palace medical room with her parents by her side. The palace doctor had confirmed that she was suffering from mild heat exhaustion, but would recover completely with rest and fluids. Her temperature was returning to normal, and the dizziness was going away. How are you feeling now, sweetheart? Catherine asked, stroking Charlotte's hair as she lay on a comfortable medical bed. Much better, Mama. The cool air feels so good. I was so scared I was going to fall down in front of everyone. Prince William sat in a chair next to the bed. He was relieved that Charlotte was safe, but he was also thinking about the guard who had broken protocol to help her. Charlotte, do you remember the guard who came to tell us you were sick? Charlotte nodded. Yes, Papa. He is my guardian. William and Catherine looked at each other with surprise. Your guardian? Catherine asked. What do you mean? Charlotte realized she had never told her parents about her special connection with Sergeant Morrison. She had kept it secret because she was not sure they would understand. But now that he had helped her so dramatically, she wanted them to know how special he was. There is this one guard who always watches out for me during ceremonies. I do not know his name, but he has been helping me for weeks. When I touch my bracelet and look at him, he finds ways to help me feel better. William frowned, not because he was angry, but because he was trying to understand what Charlotte meant. What kind of help? Charlotte explained about all the times when she had felt uncomfortable or scared during palace events and how touching her bracelet seemed to signal her guardian that she needed assistance. She told them about the water that appeared when she was hot, the chairs that showed up when she was tired, and the quiet explanations that came when she was confused. I thought it was just coincidence at first, Charlotte said, but it happened too many times. He was always watching out for me, even though he could not talk to me or move from his position. Catherine and William listened to their daughter's story with growing amazement. They had not realized that Charlotte had been struggling with some aspects of royal duties or that she had formed this unusual connection with one of the guards. Why did you not tell us you were having trouble during ceremonies? Catherine asked gently. Charlotte looked down at her hands. I did not want to disappoint you. I know being a princess is important, and I wanted to be brave, but sometimes it is really hard. And I felt better knowing that someone was watching out for me. William reached over and took Charlotte's hand. Charlotte, you never have to hide your feelings from us. We want to help you when things are difficult. But what about my guardian? Charlotte asked. Is he going to get in trouble for helping me today? William and Catherine exchanged another look. They both knew that breaking protocol during a state visit was extremely serious. The guard would certainly face consequences for his actions. "We do not know yet what will happen," William said carefully, "but we will make sure that everyone understands he was trying to help you." Meanwhile, news of the incident was spreading beyond the palace walls. Reporters who had been at the ceremony were calling their news organizations with the story. Social media was buzzing with speculation about what had happened. Some news reports focused on Princess Charlotte's health emergency and were sympathetic about a child becoming ill during a long, hot ceremony. Other reports focused on the unprecedented breach of royal protocol by the guard. Television news programs were showing the footage of Sergeant Morrison walking across the courtyard and approaching the royal family. Royal experts were being interviewed to explain why this had never happened before and what the consequences might be. Public reaction was mixed. Some people criticized Morrison for breaking the rules and causing a disruption during an important diplomatic event. They argued that royal guards must follow protocol no matter what, because order and tradition are essential to the monarchy. But many other people saw Morrison as a hero who had put a child's welfare above rules and regulations. Social media posts praised him for having the courage to act when he saw someone in need. People shared stories of times when they wished someone had broken the rules to help them. The hashtag #CharRoyalGuardian began trending on social media as people debated whether Morrison should be punished or rewarded for his actions. Inside the palace, senior officials were meeting to decide how to handle the situation. The incident had created several problems that needed to be addressed quickly. First, there was the question of palace security. If one guard could break protocol so easily, what did that say about the effectiveness of their training and procedures? Other guards needed to understand what was acceptable and what was not. Second, there was the diplomatic aspect. The German. Visitors needed to be assured that the British royal family was taking their visit seriously, despite the disruption to the ceremony. Third, there was the media attention. The palace needed to control the narrative about what had happened and why, without revealing too much about their internal security procedures. But most importantly, there was the question of what to do about Sergeant Morrison himself. His actions had clearly been motivated by genuine concern for Princess Charlotte's welfare. But he had also violated fundamental rules that all royal guards were expected to follow, without exception. Colonel Andrews was preparing a detailed report about the incident for his superiors. He had interviewed several other guards who were present at the ceremony, and all of them confirmed that Princess Charlotte had appeared to be in distress. Andrews was also reviewing Morrison's service record, which was exemplary. In 15 years, Morrison had never received a single disciplinary action. His performance evaluations were consistently excellent. His fellow guards and supervisors all described him as reliable, professional, and completely trustworthy. This made the decision about Morrison's future much more complicated. The palace could not simply ignore what he had done, but they also could not ignore his years of outstanding service and his genuine motivation to protect the royal family. As evening approached, Morrison was at his small apartment in London, waiting to hear about his fate. He had turned off his phone to avoid calls from reporters who had somehow gotten his number. He spent the time thinking about his 15 years of service and wondering if he would ever work as a royal guard again. Morrison did not regret his decision to help Princess Charlotte, but he was worried about his future. Being a royal guard was not just his job, it was his identity. He had dedicated his adult life to protecting the royal family, and he was not sure what he would do if that career was over. Back at the palace, Princess Charlotte was feeling well enough to have dinner with her family in their private quarters. The state visit was continuing with the German guests, but Charlotte had been excused from the evening events to rest and recover. As they ate dinner together, Charlotte kept thinking about her guardian and hoping that he would not be punished too severely for helping her. She had never intended for her secret signal system to get him in trouble. The consequences of breaking protocol were spreading in all directions, and nobody knew yet how the story would end. 3 days after the incident, Sergeant Morrison received an official letter requesting his presence at Buckingham Palace for a formal inquiry. The letter was delivered by a palace courier and had the royal seal on the envelope, making it clear that this was very serious business. Morrison dressed in his civilian clothes and arrived at the palace at exactly 9 o'clock in the morning. He was escorted to a conference room he had never seen before, deep inside the administrative section of the palace. The room had dark wood panels on the walls and a long table with several chairs. Seated at the table were Colonel Andrews, the Deputy Private Secretary to the royal family, and 2 other senior palace officials whom Morrison recognized but had never met personally. Their faces were serious and formal as Morrison entered the room. "Please sit down, Sergeant Morrison," Colonel Andrews said, gesturing to a chair at the opposite end of the table. Morrison sat down and placed his hands on the table in front of him. He had been preparing for this meeting for 3 days, thinking about what he would say and how he would explain his actions. "Sergeant Morrison," the Deputy Private Secretary began, "this inquiry is being conducted to establish the facts about your actions during the German state visit. I want to remind you that your career and reputation are at stake, so please answer all questions truthfully and completely." Morrison nodded. "I understand, sir." The Deputy Private Secretary opened a folder and began reading from notes. "According to multiple witnesses, you left your assigned position during the ceremony, approached the royal family without permission, and interrupted a formal state occasion. Is this correct?" "Yes, sir. That is correct." "Can you explain why you chose to break protocol in such a dramatic way?" Morrison had been thinking about this question for days. He knew that his answer would determine his future, but he also knew that he had to tell the truth. "Sir, I observed that Princess Charlotte was showing clear signs of heat exhaustion. Her face was pale and flushed. She was swaying on her feet and appeared to be close to fainting. In my judgment, she was in immediate medical danger." One of the other officials leaned forward. "Sergeant Morrison, you are trained to maintain your position regardless of circumstances. Other guards have remained at their posts during emergencies, natural disasters, and even direct threats. What made this situation different?" Morrison thought carefully before answering. "Sir, I have been observing Princess Charlotte during public events for several months. I had noticed that she sometimes struggled with the demands of formal ceremonies, and I had developed a concern for her well-being." The Deputy Private Secretary raised his eyebrows. "What do you mean by observing the princess? That was not part of your assigned duties." Morrison realized he was about to reveal the secret communication system that had developed between him and Charlotte. This might make things worse for him, but he had to be honest. "Sir, over time I noticed that Princess Charlotte would touch her pearl bracelet when she was feeling uncomfortable or distressed during ceremonies. It seemed to be an unconscious gesture that she made when she needed help or reassurance." Officials looked at each other with surprise. Colonel Andrews frowned and said, "Are you saying that you were monitoring Princess Charlotte's personal behaviors instead of focusing on your security duties?" "No, sir. I was always focused on security. But I began to notice patterns in her behavior that indicated when she might need assistance. I never communicated with her directly or acknowledged her in any way. But I did begin to alert palace staff when I thought she might be having difficulties." The Deputy Private Secretary wrote notes quickly. "What do you mean you alerted palace staff?" Morrison explained how he had developed subtle ways to signal to other palace employees when Charlotte seemed to need help. He would make small gestures, or movements that experienced staff members learned to recognize as indicating that the princess needed water, a break, or some other form of assistance. "This is highly irregular," one of the officials said. "Guards are not supposed to be making judgments about the royal family's needs or communicating with other staff members during ceremonies." "I understand that, sir, but I felt that protecting Princess Charlotte's well-being was part of my duty to protect the royal family." Colonel Andrews asked the next question. "Sergeant Morrison, on the day of the German visit, what specifically made you decide that the situation required you to break protocol?" Morrison remembered that moment clearly. "Sir, when I looked at Princess Charlotte during the president's speech, I could see that she was in immediate danger of collapsing. Her distress signal was more urgent than I had ever seen before. She looked directly at me with an expression that clearly communicated that this was an emergency." "You are saying that Princess Charlotte deliberately signaled to you for help?" Morrison hesitated. He did not want to get Charlotte in trouble for developing their unofficial communication system, but he had to tell the truth. Sir, I believe that Princess Charlotte had learned that I was watching out for her safety. She may have unconsciously begun to look to me when she felt she needed help. On that particular day, her signal was unmistakable. She was asking for immediate assistance. The room was quiet for several moments as the officials processed this information. The idea that Princess Charlotte had developed a secret communication system with one of her guards was completely unprecedented. The deputy private secretary finally spoke. Sergeant Morrison, what you are describing suggests a personal relationship between yourself and Princess Charlotte that goes well beyond appropriate professional boundaries. Morrison felt his heart sinking. This was exactly what he had been afraid of. His attempt to protect Charlotte was being interpreted as inappropriate personal involvement. Sir, I never spoke to Princess Charlotte or acknowledged her personally, in any way. I never broke protocol except for the one incident we are discussing. I simply became aware that she sometimes needed help during difficult public events, and I tried to ensure that she received that help through proper channels. One of the other officials asked, "Why did you not report your observations about Princess Charlotte to your superiors? If you were concerned about her welfare during public events, the appropriate action would have been to file a report through official channels." Morrison had to admit that this was a fair question. Sir, I was concerned that reporting Princess Charlotte's occasional difficulties might result in her being excluded from public events altogether. I thought it was better to find ways to help her participate successfully rather than to limit her opportunities to learn about royal duties. Colonel Andrews looked thoughtful. Sergeant Morrison, you understand that what you are describing is a significant breach of protocol, even if your motivations were well-intentioned. Guards are not supposed to make independent decisions about how to manage the royal family's needs. Yes, sir. I understand that I should have followed proper procedures. The deputy private secretary closed his folder and looked at Morrison seriously. Sergeant Morrison, this inquiry has revealed information that goes far beyond what we initially understood about the incident during the German state visit. We need time to consider the full implications of what you have told us. Morrison nodded. I understand, sir. You will continue to be relieved of duty while we complete our investigation. We may need to speak with you again, and we will certainly need to interview Princess Charlotte about her recollections of these events. Morrison felt worried about Charlotte being questioned. Sir, I hope that Princess Charlotte will not be made to feel that she did anything wrong. She is just a child who was trying to cope with difficult situations. That will be determined during our investigation, the deputy private secretary replied. You are dismissed, Sergeant Morrison. We will contact you when we have reached a decision about your future. As Morrison left the palace, he felt uncertain about what would happen next. He had told the truth about everything, but he was not sure if that would be enough to save his career. What Morrison did not know was that the officials planned to speak with Princess Charlotte and her parents that very afternoon to learn more about this unusual situation from their perspective. That afternoon, Princess Charlotte sat in her father's private study with both her parents, waiting to speak with the palace officials about Sergeant Morrison. She had been nervous all day since learning about the investigation, worried that she had gotten her guardian in serious trouble. The deputy private secretary arrived with Colonel Andrews and one other official. They sat down in comfortable chairs around the fireplace, trying to make the atmosphere as relaxed as possible for Charlotte. Princess Charlotte, the deputy private secretary began gently, we need to ask you some questions about your experiences during palace ceremonies. Please remember that you are not in any trouble. We just want to understand what happened. Charlotte nodded, twisting her pearl bracelet nervously around her wrist. Can you tell us about the guard who helped you during the German state visit, Sergeant Morrison? Charlotte looked at her parents, then back at the officials. He is my guardian. He has been watching out for me during ceremonies for a long time. What do you mean when you say he was watching out for you? Charlotte explained how she had first noticed Sergeant Morrison's kindness when she stumbled on the palace steps weeks earlier. She told them about how she gradually realized that he was paying special attention to her welfare during public events. I started touching my bracelet when I felt scared or sick or tired, Charlotte said. And somehow, help would always come. Someone would bring me water or explain what was happening or give me a place to sit down. Prince William leaned forward. Charlotte, did you know that Sergeant Morrison was the one arranging for you to get help? I was not sure at first, but after it happened so many times, I started to think that maybe he was helping me somehow. He could not talk to me or move from his position, but I felt like he understood when I needed help. Colonel Andrews asked, on the day of the German visit, what made you signal to Sergeant Morrison? Charlotte's eyes filled with tears as she remembered how sick she had felt that day. I thought I was going to faint in front of everyone. I was so hot and dizzy, and there were still 20 more minutes of speeches. I was really scared. Did you deliberately try to get Sergeant Morrison's attention? Yes, Charlotte admitted, quietly. I looked right at him and tried to tell him with my eyes that I needed help really badly. I even said help with my mouth, but no sound came out. Catherine put her arm around Charlotte. Sweetheart, you did exactly the right thing. When you feel sick, you should always ask for help. The deputy private secretary made notes as Charlotte spoke. Princess Charlotte, how did Sergeant Morrison's attention make you feel during palace events? Charlotte thought about this question carefully. It made me feel safer and braver. I knew that even if the ceremonies were long and boring or scary, someone was watching out for me. It made me feel like I could be a good princess because I was not alone. The officials spent another 30 minutes asking Charlotte about her experiences with public events and her relationship with Sergeant Morrison. Charlotte answered all their questions honestly, explaining how much it had meant to her to have someone who understood when she was struggling. After the officials left, Charlotte's parents sat with her to discuss what had happened. Charlotte, Prince William said, what you experienced with Sergeant Morrison is very unusual. Guards are not supposed to form personal connections with the royal family. Is he going to lose his job because of me? Charlotte asked, her voice shaking. Catherine hugged her daughter. We do not know yet what will happen. But I want you to understand that Sergeant Morrison chose to help you because he cares about your well-being. He knew he might get in trouble, but he decided that keeping you safe was more important. That makes him very brave, Charlotte said. Yes, it does, William agreed. And it also makes him someone who truly understands what it means to serve the royal family. Over the next several days, the palace officials conducted a thorough review of the entire situation. They interviewed other guards, palace staff members, and anyone who had witnessed the events during recent ceremonies. What they discovered surprised everyone. Multiple staff members confirmed that they had received subtle signals from Sergeant Morrison about Princess Charlotte's needs during various events. These staff members had assumed that Morrison was acting on instructions from his superiors. The investigation also revealed that Morrison's actions had prevented several potential problems over the months he had been watching Charlotte. His early warnings had helped avoid situations where Charlotte might have become seriously ill or distressed during important public events. Medical experts who reviewed the incident during the German state visit confirmed that Princess Charlotte had been in genuine danger of collapsing from heat exhaustion. Morrison's quick action had likely prevented a medical emergency that could have been much more serious. 2 weeks after the investigation began, Sergeant Morrison was called back to the palace for a final meeting. This time, he was asked to meet in a different room, one that was more comfortable and less formal than the conference room where he had been questioned. To Morrison's surprise, Prince William was waiting for him when he arrived. Sergeant Morrison, William said, standing up and extending his hand for a handshake. Thank you for coming. Morrison was confused but shook the prince's hand respectfully. Your Royal Highness, please sit down. I wanted to speak with you personally about what happened during the German state visit and what we learned during our investigation. William sat down across from Morrison and spoke in a warm, conversational tone. First, I want to thank you for the care and attention you have shown toward Princess Charlotte over these past months. We had no idea that she was sometimes struggling with public events or that you had found ways to help her cope with those difficulties. Morrison felt a wave of relief. This did not sound like he was about to be fired. William continued. Charlotte, has told us how much it meant to her to know that someone was watching out for her welfare. Your presence gave her confidence and helped her participate successfully in royal duties that might otherwise have been overwhelming for a child her age. I am glad that I was able to help Princess Charlotte, Your Royal Highness. What you did during the German state visit was extraordinary, William said. You risked your entire career to protect my daughter when you saw that she was in danger. That kind of dedication and quick thinking is exactly what we need in our security team. Morrison was not sure what William was leading up to, but he waited politely for the prince to continue. We have decided that rather than punishing you for breaking protocol, we want to recognize your service and your judgment. You are being promoted to senior sergeant and will be assigned to a special role overseeing the security arrangements for Charlotte and her siblings during public events. Morrison could not believe what he was hearing. Instead of losing his job, he was being promoted and given more responsibility. William smiled at Morrison's shocked expression. Sergeant Morrison, sometimes the most honorable thing a person can do is to know when to break the rules. You understood that protecting Princess Charlotte's well-being was more important than following protocol, and you had the courage to act on that understanding. Thank you, Your Royal Highness. I do not know what to say. Charlotte has asked if she can thank you personally for helping her. Would that be appropriate? Morrison nodded, still overwhelmed by this unexpected turn of events. A few minutes later, Princess Charlotte entered the room with her mother. She walked directly to Morrison and looked up at him with a big smile. Sergeant Morrison, she said formally, thank you for taking care of me and for helping me when I was sick. You are truly my guardian. Then more quietly she added, I was so worried that you would get in trouble because of me. Morrison knelt down so that he was at Charlotte's eye level. Princess Charlotte, it was my honor to help you. You did nothing wrong. You were brave to ask for help when you needed it. Charlotte surprised everyone by giving Morrison a quick hug. I am so glad you will still be here to watch out for us. As Morrison left the palace that day, he reflected on how much his life had changed in just 2 weeks. He had expected to lose everything, but instead he had gained something even more valuable than his previous position. He had learned that sometimes breaking the rules can be the most honorable choice a person can make. He had discovered that protecting the people he served meant more than just following orders or maintaining traditions. Most importantly, he had shown Princess Charlotte that when people truly care about each other, they will find ways to help and protect each other, even when it is difficult or risky to do so. The story of Sergeant Morrison and Princess Charlotte became a quiet legend within the palace walls. It reminded everyone who worked there that their ultimate duty was not to rules or protocols, but to the well-being of the royal family they were privileged to serve. And Princess Charlotte learned an important lesson about courage, kindness, and the difference between following rules and doing what is right. She would carry that lesson with her for the rest of her life, long after she had outgrown the need for a guardian to watch over her during palace ceremonies.